Hi, welcome back to Mind Control, where we inspire and motivate you. Hope you enjoy the video.
Through all the things I've gone through in my life, I had a lot of downs. How did I keep the faith? There was a couple of reasons. Number one, I know from living that if you quit whatever you're trying to accomplish, if you quit, whatever you were trying to accomplish can never happen. There's not even a remote possibility. If you quit, there is no chance of it popping back up again, coming back later. Quitting is guaranteed failure. Now, when you're trying, you're going to fail. But quitting, just stopping, that was the number one thing I understood. And then number two, you have to make sure that your dreams, your aspirations and goals are so big that not accomplishing them is not an option.
And then the other layer of it is you're probably going to have some suffering to get there or some sacrifice to get there. And so once you've embraced and decided that this suffering, this sacrifice you're making is an indicator of progress. It's an indicator of obsession. Suffering and sacrifice and hard work is an indication of progress towards our dreams. The lack of sacrifice, the lack of suffering in our lives, its removal, its non-existence also equates to a non-existence of a great life, a non-existence of a dream happening, a big one anyway.
You have to want something so big that it wakes you up in the middle of the night. You have to want something so big that you think about it all the time. You have to want something so big that it drives you to wake up when you don't want to. It keeps you up at night when you long been sleepy. It makes you show up, do things you wouldn't normally do. It requires extra. If you want to be extraordinary and not ordinary, if you want to be ordinary, live your life.
And so embrace the fact that you're going to have to sacrifice and suffer to some extent. Once you've embraced that it's going to happen, it's almost not that bad. It's kind of like those of you that are fit. You've sort of accepted that before you go to the gym and get there, you're going to have to suffer. And we go anyway. It becomes a habit. No one goes into a gym thinking, I'm not going to have to sacrifice or suffer. There'll be no discomfort or no pain. Yet in life, outside of that one area, most of us are worried about suffering. We're afraid of it. When we're suffering and sacrificing, we wonder whether it's worth it. We wonder whether we're supposed to. We wonder whether sacrifice or setbacks or suffering is a sign it's not our real dream, don't we? See, at the gym, you'd never think, oh, I'm going through some pain and discomfort. This must be a sign I shouldn't be at the gym. You'd never think that. So while it's happening, there's no part of you that says, this isn't right. In fact, the indication of the pain and sacrifice and sweat, don't you feel better at the gym? You're like, wow, I really sacrificed today. I really suffered. So in that area, we all know to the extent we suffer and sacrifice is to the extent we grow. And your body is a metaphor for the rest of your life. But the rest of our life, every time we sweat, every time we sacrifice, every time we suffer, we don't do what we do at the gym. We start saying, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this. Maybe I'm not cut out. Maybe it's not my destiny. Maybe I just can't do it. It's the most unbelievable, ridiculous conclusion we draw, but it's what everybody does, which is another form of distraction, is doubt. Another form of distraction is just doubt, and doubt comes from the suffer. It comes from a loss. It comes from fear. It comes from the sacrifice. And so just remember this. You're supposed to suffer and sacrifice. So let me ask you a question. What are you willing to risk in order to make your dream come true? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. You're going to take a risk. Maybe it's financial. Maybe it's a risk of time. Maybe it's a risk at your job. Maybe it's a risk of looking bad. Maybe it's a risk of failing, of falling on your face, of going broke, of going through pain, of going through anxiety. What are you willing to risk in order to win? The price you will pay for not making your dream come true is far greater than the one that you will pay to make it come true. You'll pay that one the rest of your life. And so ask yourself what you're willing to risk. What's the price you're willing to pay?
Never give up until, however long that is, step by step, piece by piece, book by book. Go for it. Don't miss the chance to grow. And resolve that you'll pay the price until you learn, change, grow, become. Then you'll discover some of life's best treasures when you pay that price.
Because what most people do when they're trying to chase their dream or their big outcome, the whole time they're negotiating the price in their head. Should I continue to do it? Is it worth it? I don't know if I can continue anymore. It's getting higher, and that price is failure. That price is setback. That price is looking back. That price can be financial, literally a physical price. And what happens is, if you don't negotiate that price in advance, it's going to steal your focus and energy and become another distraction. One of the great distractions of chasing our dreams is this thing that goes off in our head as we're negotiating the price we're paying. Is it getting too high? Is it too much? And you'll have people in your ear, it's too big a sacrifice. You're going through too much. And you begin to negotiate it in your mind. It distracts all your focus. You can't be executing and negotiating simultaneously. If you're in your head negotiating and negotiating and negotiating, you can't execute. So negotiate it now. Negotiate it with me now. What are you willing to pay? For me, when I'm after something big, as long as it's legal, ethical, and moral, I'll sacrifice everything else. But I will not sacrifice anything legal, anything unethical, or anything immoral. But beyond that, I'm going to get it. And I know that negotiation comes up front. I accept the suffering. I accept the sacrifice. I know the sacrifice is far smaller than the one I'll pay if I don't do it. And I eliminate distractions, and I go freaking get what I want in my life, just like you can. And this needs to be your recipe as well. Successful people don't negotiate the cost of something. They negotiate whether it's worth it. What I'm telling you is, if you really want something bad enough, it's worth it. It's worth it. So start to feed yourself the worth question over and over and over again, not the cost question. Cost is a distraction. Worth is a focus mechanism. This is so worth it. It's so worth it. It's so worth it. Focuses you. Cost distracts you.
And a friend of mine said, you know when people change? And I said, no. He said, when they get to the point when they say, I've had it. I've had it. I can do better than this.
He was in the hog pen. He was broke. He had lost everything. He was deranged and deprived and distraught. But the Bible said he came to himself in this deplorable situation. He came to himself. He didn't get any money in the mail. He didn't meet any fine person that built up his self-esteem. This was an inside job. He came to himself, said, wait a minute, I'm better than this. And the moment he made up his mind to get up, he got up. And I want to tell you something today. The moment you make up your mind to get up, you can get up. And no devil in hell, no system, no government, no power, no boss, no community, or anything else can hold you. Once you are free in your mind, you are free. The Bible says it is with the mind that we serve the Lord. This amazing piece of hard drive that God put in between our ears and is so programmable and so impressionable that there is a constant war between good and evil for the code to be able to program your mind. There's constant war, constant conflict going on as to who gets into your database and who is going to program your mind. Because all that you will do or not do, have or not have, accomplish or not accomplish, will be a direct derivative of what's going on inside of your mind. For it says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Your thinking has all the world to do with where you are. Your attitude has all the world to do with your altitude. So if you don't get clear thinking on an issue, you won't be able to develop in that area. Most generally, when we talk about that warfare and dealing with the images in our mind, we generally think in terms of sin. But I want to challenge you to understand that you have more to deal with in the warfare in your mind than just sin. You have depression, you have fear, you have phobias, you have insecurities, you have unbeliefs. There are a whole lot of dysfunctional behaviors that were inherently passed on to us, but these are the reverberating consequences of an act of sin that leave you struggling in areas that people cannot see. Lay your hand on your head. Say, this is an awesome machine. I wonder if it's being underutilized.
That's what makes us different than dogs and animals, birds, and cats and spiders and alligators. That's what makes us different than all other life forms. The ability to think, the ability to use your mind, the ability to process ideas, and not just operate by instinct. You can order the entire process of your own life. And we do that by the way we think. We do that by exercising our mind. We do that by processing ideas and come up with a better philosophy, a better strategy for our life, goals for the future, plans to achieve those goals. All this comes from developing our philosophy. Think, use your mind, come up with ideas, and strengthen your philosophy. That is the major challenge of life. You don't need a better economy. You don't need better seed and soil. In fact, when it comes to seed and soil and rain and sunshine and seasons and the miracle of life, that's all you got. Now, what if you blame this stuff? Then you're blaming all you got. Guess what I had to do at age 25 in order to change my own future? I had to change my mind. I had to change my thinking. I had to change my philosophy. I was messed up on what was causing my problem. Once I got rid of that and started going for where the real problem was, which was me, I'm telling you, my life exploded into change.
God may be giving you more to work with than what you are working with at this time. You may have far more megabytes and more things that you can potentially do than what you're doing right now. That's why I don't like to hang with low-thinking people, because they'll make you underutilize what God has given you. You need somebody to challenge you that you could be doing more than what you're doing right now. You could have more than you have right now. You could go further than you're going right now. And somebody's got to be bold enough to look you in the face and empower you to go into the enemy's camp and take back what he stole from you. Look at somebody and say, it's time for a change. What stops us from making the changes that we need in our behavior, in our situation, it's the mind. I understand that there are about 1 million what are described as sensory receptors in the brain. Sensory receptors in the brain. That through the brain sensory receptors, we're able to gather and maintain data. About 1 million sensory receptors in your brain. Huge operation in your brain. I just see it as a big electronic board with all kinds of connections going on in your head, whereby you are able to gather and galvanize data. About 1 million receptors, sensory receptors, that are constantly gathering information. While I'm speaking right now, they're operating right now in your brain, making you able not only to hear what I say, but assess my movements, and you're gathering expressed and implied information because you got it like that. You can do 2 or 3 things at the same time, 4 or 5, 6 things at the same time, and gather all of that information all at the same time, because your mind is awesome, you're bright, you're brilliant, you are fearfully and marvelously made. You're an awesome computer full of all kinds of information all the time, spouting out data, thinking and speaking all at the same time. I'm thinking about one thing and speaking something else all at the same time, because we got it like that. Look at somebody say, I'm bad. But you have 10 billion sensory receptors that work in your imagination. But those 10 billion sensory receptors that you have make your imagination so keen that you have all of these impressions that come through your ability to conjure up information through the invisible realm, and it can become more real to you, and that's what causes some people to become sick. It's when the imagined becomes more real than reality, and that's what causes them to have certain dysfunctions that cause them to be diminished in their thinking. I was watching Ray Charles. They were going through Ray Charles' life, and they were talking about Ray Charles, who was blind, couldn't see, and yet he learned how to compose music and read music by Braille. And he could write music by Braille. So he wasn't just some gifted blind person who could play. He was intelligent, he was intellectual, he was gifted, he was creative. He could read and write and compose music. Even though he couldn't see and he had lost the benefit of one of those devices that bring information to his sensory receptors, he began to rely on his invisible, the 10 billion sensory receptors to gather information through other channels. Interestingly enough, he said something that was so harmonious with my message, I thought I would include it. He said that even though he had gone blind at 7, at 5 years old, he'd seen his brother drown to death in a small basin of water, and by 7 he'd gone blind, if I remember correctly. And by the time he was 12 or so, both his parents were dead. He was blind, he'd seen a murder, and his life was off and seemingly out of control, and music became an outlet for his spirit and for his soul. And he says, even though he couldn't see, he could hear the imagined music in his head so strongly that when he got ready to compose a piece, he says he didn't need a piano. He could compose an entire piece in his head because the accuracy of the music he heard in his head was more real to him than the music he played with his fingers. So what's going on in your head often can become more real than what's going on in your life. Well, how do we get this information? We get this information through conditioning, through imagination, through suggestions, through implications, and all of this affects who we are and how we function as individuals. Are you following what I'm saying? That's why you have to watch what you do with your eye gate and your ear gate and your mouth gate, because all of these are gates to the soul whereby the enemy, evil or wickedness or righteousness comes before you. And the images that you have seen have all the world to do with who you are right now. Are you following what I'm saying?
We'd like to thank you so much for watching till the end. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments section. Please also like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and families. Please watch our other motivational videos. Thank you again.
I knew in my heart that I could do more, but I felt in my mind that I didn't have what it took. I wasn't smart enough. I didn't have a college education. I didn't have enough money. I didn't have the right contacts, but I felt in my heart I could do more. What was stopping me? The willingness to do what I knew. So I decided to learn. What is it about you that's different than your friends? That you decided, I know I can do more than what I'm doing. I know I can have more. How many of you know that? Raise your hands, please. So you've come here to increase your skill set. Let us say together, skill set. So that you can begin to expand your achievements. See, that's the difference between people who make it and people who don't make it. They don't take the time to do what you've done, to come here, invest the time and energy to develop and sharpen your skill set so you can cut through the obstacles and the stumbling blocks and the failures and the disappointments and the setbacks that will be out there waiting for you. And I can tell you, based upon my own experience, you have a power in you to overcome anything that you are confronted with. I can tell you, there's something about you that no matter what life throws at you, you will overcome it. You and I are cut from the same cloth. We're branches of the same tree. There's something in you that attracted you here, that brought you here. I only attract millionaires or millionaires in training. Some of you right now, some of you hear me with your ears, but there's some of you can feel me in your heart. You can feel me, you understand. I've been there. I've hit a wall. I know what it is to question yourself and ask yourself, am I crazy? Can I do this? I know what it is to doubt yourself.
I blame the manufacturers. I blame my negative relatives. They were always putting me down. I blame my cynical neighbors. They were just selfish, looking out for themselves. Wouldn't loan me any money. I blame the community. I blame the economy. Hey, that's a pretty good list for not doing well, isn't it? I thought it was a good list. I will never forget this one day. Mr. Shoaff was very kind, but he was also very blunt, which was helpful for me. If he hadn't been blunt, I would have missed some things. On this particular day, with a kind of question mark look on his face, he said, Jim, just out of curiosity, Tell me, how come you haven't done well up until now? Excellent question, right? Well, so I wouldn't look too bad, I decided to go through my list. How I ever had the nerve to do that, I don't know, but I did. I went through the whole list. The government, taxes, prices, everything. He was very patient and let me go through it all. When I finished, he looked over my list very carefully and said, "Mr. Rohn, big problem with your list. You aren't on it." How brilliant. And how true. When I went to work for him a few months later, I learned very quickly to tear up my list of reasons for not looking good and threw it away. And then I got a fresh piece of paper and I put one word on it. Me. There's a Black Heritage spiritual that says, "It's not my mother nor my father, nor my brother nor my sister, but it's me, O Lord, standing in the need of prayer." See, I used to blame everything outside for my lack of progress, until I found the problem was inside. For a big share of my life, I kept looking for the answers to do well outside, and I found out the answers were inside. Success is not something you pursue. Success is something you become. What are you going to do starting today that will make a difference in how your life works out? What are you going to do? See, if you don't do something starting today that will make a difference, guess what? It's going to be the same. And you can guess what the next 5 years are going to be like. Just look at the last 5. The next 5 years will be like the last 5 unless you, Major Key, make all the changes. Now sometimes, for some people it will continue, but sure enough, here's where it usually levels off. If there are no more exams to take, if there's no demand to get out paper and pencil, why read any more books? Now you will just learn by some experience. Just getting out there and by doing it wrong and doing it right and stumbling around. You learn some. But can you imagine what would happen if you kept an accelerated learning curve all the rest of your life? Can you imagine what you could learn to do? The skills you could develop? The capacities you could have? So here's what I'm asking you to do. Be that unusual person who keeps up his learning curve. Succeeding in life is not usual. It's unusual. You need to develop some unusual habits to earn the outstanding rewards.
This is not for everyone. This is not for the faint at heart. This is for people who have goals and dreams they want to achieve.
Sometimes we look at pieces in our lives that don't make sense. The key is what we do in our times of pain. Pain will change us. Every painful time, even though you don't like it, it's developing something in you that can only be developed in the tough times.
You have got to change the way you think. It is the whole determining factor of where you go in life. We are all where we are today because we thought ourselves to this position. If you don't like the position, think yourself out of it.
If you want to be an impactful personality, you have to develop certain types of thinking and perceptions that change the way you see yourself and see the world. I call this the spirit of leadership.
Being able to watch something grow very calmly, patiently. I can't go any faster. We do that to our brain. We put a governor on our brain. The second we feel pain, discomfort, suffering, all those words that we hate to say because we have this happy, peaceful world we live in now, we stop. We slow down. And if you can get through these different barriers and gain 5%, 2%, 3%, that 40% becomes 60. That 60% becomes 70, 80, and 90. And then you'll hopefully one day near 100. That dreamer mentality just would always fuel me. It would just fuel me, man. What if I can be a SEAL, man? Now I run 205 miles. What if I can go? What if I can go? And how would that feel? You have to go into those dark chambers that we often shut off, and you got to open them up.
Book, you tell people to make a list of everything working against them, every real, valid excuse.
Right.
Why do you have them do that?
There's a lot of power in that list. So in that list of who you are, what makes you up, all these other things, it goes back to, once again, accepting. You have to first accept it before you can fix it. A lot of people walk around, oh man, I'm good. I'm good. No, you're not. You have to accept what you're not. You have to, and people don't want to do that. And that's the only way you can fix it. You have to accept it first before you can go on the journey. A lot of folks never even start the journey, man. They never start the journey because they live in this fake life that who they want to be, they act like they are, but they're not because they haven't fixed all this stuff yet. You got to fix this first before we can start our journey in life. So that's why I have them make this list. You fix these problems, now your journey can begin because you no longer care about how people are judging you. When you care more about how someone's judging you, you're going to stay right there. There's no forward momentum. So that's the whole thing about that list.
Nelson Mandela is a particularly special case study in the leadership world because he is universally regarded as a great leader. You can take other personalities, and depending on the nation you go to, we have different opinions about other personalities. But Nelson Mandela across the world is universally regarded as a great leader. He was actually the son of a tribal chief. And he was asked one day, how did you learn to be a great leader? And he responded that he would go with his father to tribal meetings. And he remembers two things when his father would meet with other elders. One, they would always sit in a circle. And two, his father was always the last to speak.
The scripture says the spirit of faith is in our words. When you say, I am blessed, I have favor, I'm coming out of debt, angels go to work. Good breaks will find you. The right people will track you down. And you can think positive. You can believe for favor. That's good, but nothing happens till you speak. The miracle is in your mouth. There is healing in your mouth. There is freedom in your mouth. There are new levels in your mouth. If you're fighting an illness, it's easy to talk about the medical report and how bad it looks. And I don't think I'll ever get well. When you speak that, you're calling in more sickness, more defeat. You need to change what you're saying. The scripture says, let the weak say, I am strong. It doesn't say, let the weak talk about the weakness. Let the weak call 5 friends and discuss the problem. That's giving life to the negative. Now, I'm not asking you to deny the facts. Just say what God says about you. Your report should be, God is restoring health back into me. The number of my days He will fulfill. My mother wouldn't be here today after being diagnosed with terminal cancer in 1981 if she had not done this. It's not enough to just not say anything negative. You have to be on the offensive. All through the day, I would hear her quoting scriptures. When somebody asked how she was doing, it was never a sad song. It's hard. I don't understand it. I'm tired. Her report was, I am healed. With long life, God will satisfy me. What He started in my life, He's going to finish. She didn't feel healed. She felt weak, but she said, I am strong. The medical report said she was done, but she said, I will live and not die. She got in agreement with God and released the miracle in her mouth. 38 years later, she's still alive and healthy. Are there miracles in your mouth waiting to be released? Joel, when I break this addiction, then I'll tell people I'm free. You have to tell them first. Every day you need to declare, I am free, I am clean, this addiction does not control me. Every time you say, I am free, in the unseen realm, chains are broken, strongholds are loosed, freedom starts heading your way. You keep speaking it, and you will become what you're saying. You are prophesying your future. When David faced Goliath, a giant twice his size, it wasn't a coincidence that he looked at him and said, this day I will defeat you and feed your head to the birds of the air. He wasn't just being positive. He wasn't just talking smack. He understood this principle. The miracle was in his mouth. He had to release the victory. What if he would have said, wow, I thought I wanted to face Goliath, but look how big he is. I don't have any armor. I don't feel qualified. I don't think I have a chance. If he would have talked defeat, we wouldn't know who David was. If he would have just thought positive, I believe I can do it, I believe I've got what it takes, he wouldn't have defeated Goliath. He knew he had to speak it. I will defeat you. You may have a giant in your path, a giant of debt, a giant of depression, a giant of sickness. Like David, you need to announce to that giant, I will defeat you. You will not keep me from my destiny. The forces that are for me are greater than the forces that are trying to stop me. The scripture says, if any two of you agree, anything you ask according to God's will, it will be done. There's power in agreement. What's interesting is David didn't have anyone to agree with him. His brothers looked down on him, thought he was too small. His father saw him as less than, like he'd never amount to much. King Saul didn't think he had a chance. He even tried to give David his armor so at least it wouldn't be so painful. Nobody was there to encourage David, to say, hey, David, you can do this. We believe in you. You've got what it takes. There are times, like with David, you can't find anyone to agree with you. But I've learned if you'll come into agreement with yourself, if you'll get your heart and mouth in agreement and start speaking victory, declaring that you are well able, that you are blessed, that you will defeat the addiction, then even though others don't agree, because you're in agreement with yourself, you will see giants defeated. You will accomplish dreams that others thought were impossible. Now don't be discouraged because nobody is cheering you on and nobody sees what you see. Sometimes God puts things in your heart that other people don't understand. Seems too big, too impossible. Instead of encouraging you, they'll do just the opposite. You think you can beat that sickness? I don't know. My grandmother died of the same thing. You still think you're going to have a baby? After all these years, you're kind of getting up there. You really believe you can build that orphanage, write that book, lead your company in sales, move into that nice neighborhood? I just don't see it. The good news is they don't have to see it. You don't need them to agree with you. Come into agreement with yourself. Get your heart and words going in the right direction. Start talking like it's going to happen. You have to say it before you'll see it. When David went out to face Goliath, all the Israeli army and all the Philistine army were watching. Here was this teenager with no military training, no experience, young, small, looked like a boy. In front of all of them, he had the audacity to say with confidence, Goliath, I will defeat you. Some of them made fun, ridiculed. Even Goliath laughed and said, am I a dog that you'd come at me with a stick? Sending this little boy, is that all you've got? The people around you may not see the greatness in you. They'll judge you by the outside, by your size, your experience, your background, your nationality. Don't let them talk you out of what God put in your heart. Do like David, keep speaking the victory in spite of what the naysayers think. Keep declaring your vision in spite of what experts are telling you. They don't know what God put in you. Don't let their negative words keep you from speaking positive, faith-filled words. When we were trying to acquire this place, the former Compaq Center, it was like David versus Goliath. The company we were up against was the largest taxpayer in Texas, a huge real estate company. And there were plenty of people that didn't think we had a chance. Not just our critics, but even some of the experts. Deep down, I knew God put this in my heart. So I announced to the congregation that we were going to purchase the Compaq Center. Over the next 3 years, we had all kinds of opposition. Plenty of times where it didn't look like it would ever work out. I was tempted to talk about what I saw. Our opponents are so strong. They have more funds. I don't see how this can happen. But I understood this principle. We give life to what we speak. If you start speaking the negative, agreeing with the doubt, talking about how big the problem is, you are giving life to the wrong things. Your words can keep you from your destiny. In the scripture, an angel told a man named Zechariah that his wife was going to have a baby. He was surprised because they were too old to have children. Zechariah said to the angel, "Are you sure? Look how old we are." The angel said, "Yes, Zechariah, it will happen, but because you doubted, you will remain silent and not be able to speak until the child is born." That's how powerful words are. God knew if Zechariah went around talking defeat, "I don't see how, we're too old," it would have kept the baby from being born. God has put dreams and promises in your spirit that may seem too big, impossible. You don't have the resources, the experience, the connections. Don't do like Zechariah and talk yourself out of the miracle. Get in agreement with God. Dare to declare what He says about you. Maybe you're facing an illness. There's no sign of it getting better. You're right where Zechariah was. How can this happen? The medical report says no way. God has done His part. Now it's up to you.
So it's vitally important to discover, first of all, that there is a voice in your head that indulges in self-talk most of the time. And for many people, interestingly enough, that self-talk, for many people, is not always negative, but for many people, it is more negative than positive. A good event that happened yesterday, you might have gone to a nice reunion, or you went out into nature and you witnessed a beautiful sunset. Okay, you can remember it today and think that was a beautiful sunset, or we had a nice talk yesterday. But you can't do that much thinking about a nice event. But the mind, when there's something negative that happens yesterday, somebody offended you, or didn't give you the attention that you wanted from him, then you can start thinking of how, oh my God, what he did, he's really, next time he does that, I'm going to say that, or he really should, you can go on for a long time dwelling on something negative, much longer than dwelling on something positive. It is so, seemingly a negative event is much more food for useless mind activity than a positive event. And this is why for many people, a significant percentage of their mind activity is negative. For some people, it is almost 100% negative, but it is unlikely that these people would get a job in this company because your predominant state of consciousness, your predominant mental emotional state, there's a certain correlation between who you associate with, where you find yourself, and even what kind of things happen to you. There is a correlation which is not always immediately recognizable, but there is a correlation between a person's predominant mental emotional state and who they are with, who their friends are, where they work, and even what happens to them. So if you are in a very negative state a long time, you tend to attract also negative events, but you can only have to find that out for yourself. I'm not saying believe me. I know it from my own life, because when I first discovered this, I was still very young. I discovered that there is a correlation between my mind activity and what happens to me. I found a book several books that somebody left with us when I was 17. And there for the first time, I read about a person's mind, and I suddenly realized my mind was predominantly negative because I was a very unhappy child. And so my childhood was not pleasant, And so the initial conditioning of my life was that my mind was continuously commenting and saying how bad my life was. And whenever something bad happened to me, I had a phrase that would occur again in my mind that, of course, bad things always happen to you, don't they? They're bound to happen to you. It always happens to you. So I was talking to myself and saying that bad things would always happen to me, and they did. So you can discover first that the spiritual awakening is to discover that there is continuous mind activity.
Well, the first book was called Extreme Ownership. And what that means is you're not going to make any excuses. You're not going to blame anyone else. You're going to take ownership of whatever happens. And when something goes wrong, instead of pointing fingers and blaming someone else, you're going to take ownership of that problem. You're going to take ownership of figuring out what the solution to that problem is, and you're going to take ownership of implementing that solution. So that is the number one thing that I'm looking for a leader to do, is to take ownership of the problems. And again, we called that extreme ownership. And it was one of those things that was very easy to see in a SEAL platoon, because when someone doesn't take ownership and starts pointing fingers and blaming, well, like for instance, right now, if I started pointing my finger and blaming you for something, what's your natural reaction going to be?
You get defensive, get upset. I mean, it's not my fault this broadcast isn't what I wanted it to be. Come
exactly,
on,
exactly. And then what happens is we have a team where I'm pointing the finger at you, you're pointing the finger at someone else, and now we have no one taking ownership of the problems, and therefore the problems never get solved. The opposite of that is when you have a good leader that steps up and says, hey, Ben, you know what? This broadcast didn't go the way I wanted it to. I should have done a better job preparing for your questions. I'm sorry, I apologize. And now instead of you getting defensive, you say, you know what? No, actually, I could have done a better job. And now both of us are taking ownership of the problems, and we're going to get them solved. If you're blaming everyone else, I can't control you. I can't control these other things outside. I can't control. The only thing I can control is me. So instead of worrying about who else is causing you problems, worry about what you can do to yourself to improve your station. And if you go down that path, you're going to find you have a lot more control than you think you do.
How do we make good decisions? Well, number one, making correct decisions. You got to study. You got to know and understand. You got to know the background. You've got to know the historical outcomes of equivalent type decisions that have happened in the past, similar situations. Mm-hmm. And if you know the history and you know the background, then you can use those to assess the current situation you're in. And then once you assess the decisions that you can make, assess the possible actions that you can take, and then assess the outcomes that those decisions will have, those actions will have. And when you're doing that, you also have to assess the possibilities of inaction. So a lot of times people forget that one. They don't know if they should do A or B. What they forget is there's also, what if I don't do either? What's going to happen? Sometimes not doing either is good. Or a lot of times not doing either is bad. So you got A or B. What should you do? Maybe sometimes you got to pick A or B. Sometimes, occasionally, it's better not to do anything, and you wait and let the situation develop a little bit more. So the point of this is whatever you can know beforehand, you know. You learn, you study, you understand, you know the standard operating procedures, you know what variations have been made on the standard operating procedures, and that's how you go forward. As leaders, I see people getting caught up all the times in little things that will not affect some white belt below them in the chain of command's going all crazy, grabbing their sleeve, and this leader on the top gets concerned about it and puts time and effort into something that doesn't matter, whether it's a little personality rub, a little ego uprising. It's like, should we do it this way or should we do it that way? It doesn't matter. That's a little sleeve grab. It doesn't matter. And I see people getting caught up on things that don't matter all the time. And what I've realized is it's something that I figured out a long time ago. I don't know when, but a long time ago, I figured out, you know what? That thing doesn't matter. I'm not going to worry about it. That thing doesn't matter. I'm not going to worry about it. That thing doesn't matter. I'm not going to worry about it. That thing matters. I'm going to focus on that thing. And that makes a big difference. It's leadership capital. Because if I'm investing my leadership capital in getting your hand off my sleeve, or trying to do it my way instead of your way, or trying to keep your ego in check, if that's what I'm investing my leadership capital in, I have nothing left to invest in the thing that actually matters.
So what I meant by that is every day we're seeing who we are as people. When I was growing up, I lied for people to accept me because I didn't accept myself. So I would make up stories so then you would accept me into your world. I would, everything I did was for someone else to like me. It wasn't until I started reading my own book about how pathetic I was as a human being I could blame my dad. I can blame kids at school. I could blame having health issues, ADD, my mom not being around. I could blame a lot of people. And that's the book I was reading. And I put it off on everybody else. It wasn't until I said, you know what? For me to fix this, I got to read what the fuck is wrong with David Goggins. Not blame anybody. Read my book and say, okay, I'm afraid of my shadow. How can I overcome that? Go in the military, get your ass kicked, do things you hate to do. Be uncomfortable every fucking day of your life. Roger that. I'm not the smartest kid in the world. Okay. Instead of somebody saying, oh no, you're smart. No, don't say that to yourself. I said to myself, no, I'm a dumb motherfucker. Okay, roger that. How you get smarter? Educate yourself. So the things that we run from the truth. We're running from the truth, man. So the only way I became successful was going towards the truth. As painful and as brutal as it is, it changed me. It allowed me to become, in my own right, who I am today. The first ultra marathon wasn't smart at all. So basically what happened was, I was at military free fall school with Morgan Luttrell. Marcus Luttrell, if you guys don't know, was the lone survivor, the guy. He was in a bad op went bad. He was the only Navy SEAL that lived. Long story short, you gotta get the book, read Lone Survivor, great story. Morgan is Marcus Luttrell's twin brother, and I was there with Marcus. So what happened was, myself and Morgan were in free fall school. At the same exact time, Marcus was in the worst incident in SEAL history. So I knew that Marcus might be dead. He wasn't dead, everybody else was dead. So I actually brought Morgan, I actually told Morgan, hey man, your brother was in a bad incident. I don't know if he's alive, I don't know what's going on. Long story short, Marcus is alive, and I go on to want to raise money for families. All these guys died, they all had kids. I want to raise money for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. It's a foundation where 100% tuition goes to these kids to go to college, full tuition, whatever. So I found this great foundation. I'm gonna raise money for it. So I said, you know what? I have to Google something that's evil, something very hard. I knew nothing about ultra marathons. I hadn't even run a marathon. I knew nothing about this world. So I Googled the top 10 hardest races in the world. And what comes up is a Badwater 135. It's a 135-mile race through Death Valley in the summertime. I thought it was a stage race. I thought it was a race where you run like 20 miles, set up camp, barbecue outside, and then go run some more the next day. So I called the race director up at the race and said, hey, Chris, his name is Chris Kosman, I want to do your race. So we had a long conversation. I was much heavier then, and I hadn't put running shoes on in over a year.
How heavy are you at this point?
I'm around between 240 to 270.
Whoa.
I'm in there. I'm in that range. My weight has varied a lot through the SEAL teams and out of the SEAL teams, so I was a heavy guy. But the long and short of it all was, I hadn't put running shoes on in over a year. I was a big-time power lifter. I lifted weights heavy. That's what I did. Right. I got back home from Iraq, went straight to free fall school, and then this happened. So I called Chris Kosman up on a Wednesday. He says, look, man, the only way you can qualify for my race is to run 100 miles at one time in 24 hours or less. There happened to be a race that Saturday, so 4 days later. And he said, if you qualify by running 100 miles or less in 24 hours, I will consider you my race. My goal was 100 miles. So I got to mile 70, and I cleared 70 miles in like 12, 13 hours pretty quickly. But I was done.